All right, good afternoon. Today we are speaking with Pierce Ujjainwalla, the co-founder and CEO of Knak. Knak enables enterprises and their marketing teams to create emails and landing pages codelessly. Over 10,000 marketers at companies like Citrix, Dish Network, and Triumph Motorcycles have used Knak to build hundreds of thousands of emails, seamlessly integrating them into marketing automation platforms such as Marketo, Eloqua, Salesforce, Adobe Campaign, and SendGrid. Originally founded in 2015 and having grown completely through bootstrapping, Knak has some pretty impressive metrics. From a customer perspective, they have been growing annually revenues over 100% over the last 3 years, with gross retention over 99%. Product, 4.9 star rating out of 5 on Capterra and 4.7 star rating out of 5 on G2. So obviously very high in terms of product quality and appreciation. And then from a culture perspective, a 5-star rating on Glassdoor, 100% CEO approval rating, and an ENPS, employee NPS of 72. So prior to founding Knak, Pierce previously launched actually a company called Revenue Pulse, a marketing operations consultancy that is still running profitably. So Pierce, thanks very much for setting aside the time to share your experience and learnings with other startup and scale-up founders and CEOs.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think you're a great subject for this conversation. So let's start at the beginning, Pierce. We mentioned that you previously founded Revenue Pulse. So you're running Revenue Pulse. It's a operations consultancy, so services business. How did you identify the opportunity for Knak, which is a product business, and what led you to pursue it while you were still running Revenue Pulse?
Yeah, so at Revenue Pulse, we were doing a lot of Marketo consultancy work with some of Marketo's largest customers. And pretty much unanimously across the board, every one of our customers, whether they were big or small, needed help creating emails or landing pages. Marketers are not developers, and yet this is an area that still required marketers to know how to code. And although we had developers at the time that were kind of doing these custom one-off email and landing page templates that were very profitable, I just felt like every time we were starting over and we weren't able to use all of those skills and our energy and time really as effectively as possible. We weren't building something that would get better over time. We had to start over each time. And so that was really where the idea for Knak came, was like, how can we better use our human capital to contribute something that continually gets better over time?
Got it. So you're kind of getting into sort of routine work. You're sort of like starting it over, but it was like the same kind of thing. You didn't feel like, oh, well, this is the same sort of thing, doing over and over again, maybe automating this.
Yeah, exactly. Like these things that we were creating, they all were pretty similar. We were changing like colors or the logo or the fonts. And so that was really another thing where it's like, hey, it wouldn't be that hard to just make this into a product. And so that's what we did.
Very cool. So we've obviously known each other for a number of years, and we were catching up on sort of the importance of culture. I know that just watching you and how you've grown, Revenue Pulse and Knak, I've known how much you valued culture, and you likely know that I valued it as well. But how do you define culture?
Yeah. So to me, culture is like the operating system of your company. I think it's really what kind of creates and does everything. It's that underlying layer of how people act, what they do, how they treat each other, how they treat partners, how they treat customers, how they build product. I think I have learned the hard way over, through my first company that if you don't have a good culture, it's hard to do anything else well.
Okay, so let's double click on that, because we
Yeah.
were thinking up, and I mentioned a sort of loose thesis around culture, leading to great product, leading to great, customers, leading to great growth. And then you mentioned you
Yeah.
got some pillars that are very similar to that. So why don't you talk about those pillars and how you came to that realization of what those are?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe it would help if I start with, my first company, where I think we had a laser focus on customers. Our customers loved us. Like, we got off the charts NPS. We got a lot of growth because we got referrals through customers to other customers. But internally, we were very broken. And I think that was like us over focusing, maybe over rotating on the customer perspective without looking at, hey, how is everyone on the team feeling? Are people enjoying what they're doing? Are we working well together as a team? Which we really weren't at some point. So I think that is what made me take a step back. And realize, like, hey, you need to focus on your customers. That will fuel your growth. But if you aren't functioning well as a team, like, it all kind of starts there. So you might be able to get by for a while, which we did. I think we got by having really no culture at Revenue Pulse, but it eventually caught up to us. And so going into Knak, I didn't want to make those same mistakes again. And so we focused on culture above everything else. And I'm seeing the impact that it has.
Very cool. So obviously, second time founder, learned from the first time. And was there like a specific sort of trigger at Revenue Pulse that had you say, oh my gosh, I really need to, dig
Yeah.
on culture?
Yeah.
Is it more just
Well, and
underlying?
it's interesting, right? Like, when you are starting a business, culture doesn't make you money. Like, when you're day one of a business, you're not like, hey, before I go and get new customers or deliver a product or service, let me write down my core values and figure it out. But I think what I realized was that we had no culture at Revenue Pulse, and it was turning into a company that I didn't really want it to be. There were like different subcultures that were starting to happen within the company that I didn't agree with, and there were one or two bad apples that were really driving those. But it was hard to keep them accountable because there was no playbook or anything to point to say, like, hey, it's not okay for you to do these things. Like, that's not within our core values.
You know what? I just love, the learning, the sort of like on the job learning, if you like, as an entrepreneur that you were doing there. And I think what you just said there is like so incredibly insightful, just about it's easy to measure performance. It's really difficult to measure fit, but
Yeah.
you can't do it unless you've got some sort of benchmarks or, a baseline. So
Yeah.
I know I've heard you talk about values and doing it early on. So let's talk about things like mission and vision and values and purpose. When did
Yeah.
you end up putting those in place at Revenue Pulse, and when did you end up putting them in place at Knak?
So at Revenue Pulse, it took us 7 years to do that, and I would say years 5 and 6 were very difficult because we took that long. At Knak, we did it in our second year. So I think it takes time to know what your company's values are going to be. Like, we needed to build a bit of a team. We needed to have experiences together that helped really solidify our values. So I think when we defined them, we were 8 people. And we kind of went around the table and just we didn't just talk about values. We kind of talked about things that defined us as a company, and then we translated those into our values from there.
Got it. And so did that sort of like second year at Knak more or less line up with that sort of seventh year at Revenue Pulse?
Yeah, very, very closely.
So you're learning sort of like, you know, the necessity of them at Revenue Pulse. You're putting them in place and you're going, I'm doing this earlier on at Knak. Let's get
Yeah.
in place.
Yeah, 100%. I did not, it was not a fun experience, those couple of years at Revenue Pulse, and it kind of, you have to struggle through it, and it wasn't fun. And it's kind of like, I don't want to do that again. I want to make sure that it's a positive experience for everybody at the company. And so I really felt like having the corporate why, having the values, having our mission was something to do like much earlier on.
So that's, you know, I've already quoted some stats around, you know, the strength of the culture, you know, as it, you know, graded by the employees at Knak. How about Revenue Pulse? You know, once you went through that training,
Yeah,
would you say it's a stronger, better culture now?
yeah, 100%. And I think maybe the biggest difference is that we have one culture. It's not one culture and some subcultures. It's
Right.
one culture across the entire company. Things have improved a lot. We talked about this earlier, but I think what another thing that I realized in that experience with the Revenue Pulse is that one bad apple can poison, an entire tree, or whatever the analogy is. So that was another learning for me. At the time, I didn't want to take action on the person who I knew in my gut was negatively impacting our culture at Revenue Pulse. I just kind of let it be because I didn't want to have to deal with the implications or have those tough discussions. But at the end of the day, the discussions get harder and the damage gets bigger. So I think that that's a key learning that I had, is like, you have to protect your culture, and it's not always easy to do it.
Total empathy here. Certainly made that mistake myself a number of times. So let's just, and I totally appreciate your transparency. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are going to be able to relate. So just on that note, what do you think held you back? Was it conflict avoidance? Was it that this individual was helping drive revenues and you were sacrificing culture
Yeah.
for growth? Like what held you back from having that discussion?
Yeah, I think for me, it was that I was stretched really thin, and I knew by me letting them go, I would have you know, more things on top of my plate that was already full, and that our customers would suffer. So I think for me, it was ultimately that I kept them to keep our customers happy. Again, just being too focused on the customer and not realizing enough that customer satisfaction is tied to your culture.
So we intended here to like talk about Knack, but there's just too much, you know, good learning and too many good lessons here. So you make the move, right? You
Yeah.
presumably at some point part ways with this individual. Talk about what it was like afterwards for the company, the culture, the customers, everything.
There was almost an immediate improvement. Like, I wouldn't say almost, there was an immediate improvement. Things that were hard before became easy again. And we kind of got back into like our flow state, right? Now, because of the nature, and I know you know this well, in consulting, clients can get attached to consultants or, account managers. And so, we had to navigate some of those situations, but overall customers were very understanding, a lot more than what I had built it up in my head to be. And everyone just kind of moved on.
Awesome. So essentially what was limiting you were some thinking in your head about, oh, what might be the implications or impact. And as it turned out, you had blown those out to be more than they were. And it was absolutely the right decision to take. And you're thrilled you made it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say one of the things that allowed us to make the decision was bringing someone on to help me. So like we had, again, the capacity to make the decision, but yeah, a lot of the things that I had in my mind as benefits to keep this person were not outweighing the cons.
Yeah. Awesome. Like, again,
Yeah.
great story. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can learn from that, because I'm sure that a lot of them face this kind of an issue in their companies. And like I said,
Yeah.
I certainly have. So, okay. So like coming back to, and I guess we can talk about Knack, but you can also mention obviously Revenue Pulse in this. We've talked about culture and we've talked about customers, and how do you set goals for the company and for the team to rally around, both for the long term and short term?
Yeah. So our pillars at Knack are culture, customers, product, and growth. And so we essentially have one metric for each of those pillars. So our culture, we set a metric for ENPS. Our customers, we set a metric we want to hit for NPS. And that's actually tied in with our product. So customers and products share the NPS metric, and churn. So logo churn, we look at logo churn there because we want all of our customers to be happy regardless if they're big or small. And then growth, we have an ARR target every year that we hit. It's purposely the lowest pillar that we have because we all know that growth essentially is driven by the other pillars. And I will say that is something that's relatively new at Knack. We used to focus like our weekly team meeting on growth and our finance numbers. That was how we started every meeting, but we got a lot of feedback from our team that, there's more to running this business than where we're at with our ARR. And I think that has made a huge shift just in the company and how we operate.
So this is fascinating. So what you're saying is that when you have like a company meeting presentation and you're talking about the pillars and you're talking about how we're doing, you actually start with, here's how we're doing on culture. And then you talk about the product, and then finally growth.
Yeah, so basically the structure of our meetings, so we're 30 people now. We still have everyone in the whole company on our Tuesday all hands call. And so now we get into breakout rooms. So we get into breakout rooms with like 5 or 6, actually it's like 7 or 8 people now in each one. And we go through stories from everyone on the team. So everyone in that breakout room shares stories about culture, about customers, about product and growth. And then there's a leader from that team. So it's not like the C-level people giving the update. It's anyone in the company. We all come back. There's a leader from each of those breakouts who presents to the team on each of those pillars. And so we get updates from, some weeks it's developers who are giving the updates, other weeks it's our designer or, anyone in the company is doing that. And it's always centered around those four things. And then one thing that I think is very relevant to this conversation is in the NHL, I've noticed a few teams do this. So the Calgary Flames have like a fireman's hat that they give out at the end of each game to the player of the game. So if one player wins it one game, they give it to the next player then the game after. And so we've incorporated something like that into Knak. We call it our Knackalate award. So the end of every meeting, the person who won the Knackalate the week before gives it out. And the criteria for it is to the person who best represents the company core values. And so not only is one person recognized every week for best representing the values, but the core values are also repeated every week. And, we've had people like who go into tears because they're so happy to win the award. And,
Wow.
they're in positions that might not normally get recognized. And it's like, so I think it's everyone's favorite part of the weekly meeting.
That is so awesome. So it sounds like you have an incredibly tight and close-knit team, right?
Yeah.
With all this
Yeah.
sharing of the stories, everybody's getting to know one another better. And there's, there's the congratulatory element and the feel good of, hey, this person did really well at this, and the recognition, the acknowledgement.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, everyone shares every week. I also think it's a great way to do it because everyone has practice, like speaking in front of the whole team. It becomes just normal thing to do. And we hear from everybody. So
Very cool. So just so you
yeah.
weekly sort of all hands meeting, and it's
Yep.
an hour, but there's sort of the breakouts beforehand, and then you come back together.
We do the whole thing in an hour. So there's kind of like a very quick intro. Hey, how's everyone doing? We go into the breakouts for 20 minutes. Then we come back and like it's the 4 or 5 leaders from each group who present, and then we do our accolade, and that's an hour.
And I imagine you mix up those teams every time, so you're always
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
different.
we use Zoom, so it automatically like randomly selects people. And people are great about, volunteering to be the leaders of the group. Again, it kind of goes back to our culture. It's just everyone wants to contribute.
Yeah, and it also sounds like, and in terms of like giving the gift, there's also that sort of giving element, right? Like, so you want to contribute and you want to give, and it's, it's a positive, feel good environment generally.
Yep. Be positive. That's one of our values.
Okay, so it's funny you touch upon, it's a good segue in terms of the remote work. So you're bringing on new people. How do
Yep.
you instill the Knak culture? How do you make them aware of
Yep.
what Knak culture is like, instill it in them, both pre-COVID when in person,
Yeah.
and through COVID and through virtual?
Yeah. So more than half of our company is remote, spread out across Canada. So that was already kind of part of our culture beforehand, was to be able to do these things virtually. I think because there isn't just like, I think because everyone on the team looks at themselves as like a steward for our culture, that it gets passed through to other people. Obviously, we have very strict like screenings that we do as well to make sure that people are culture fits. But in terms of onboarding, I think that's a big part of it. We do involve our HR lead in like getting people on board and making sure are pointed to all the right resources for our culture. And she also does one-on-ones with everyone that are very much just like culture focused. And then I think they get it through the team meetings and all that. Pre-COVID, we were getting together with the whole company twice a year as well. Just, virtual, we do our best, but we also like to get everyone together twice a year. We did them in Ottawa when kind of get everyone together, do like strategy sessions, but then also do a lot of like non-work activities for people to get to know each other better. So looking forward to getting back to this.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
imagine. So what about finding the right people? Because, it's obviously, you mentioned sort of bad apple earlier. Like, how do you,
Yeah.
there's identifying a bad apple once you have them on, but like, how do you even prevent the bad apple from coming in the first place? Like, what kind of
Yeah.
screening and filtering do you use from a culture perspective while still simultaneously getting the right level of experience, performance, attitude, and so on,
Yeah.
in you candidates?
Yeah. It's not easy. We do a lot of interviews. A lot of people don't get selected. We're very ruthless in that. But yeah, so we have an original screening interview where we look mostly for culture fit. And then we have like 4 other interviews after that one where they meet different members of the team and everyone has to kind of sign off on it. Um, Up until recently, I was still involved with hiring. Now, our other, hiring managers, we feel that they know the culture well enough and are good judges of it that I don't need to be involved anymore. Um, and that's a lot. I will say maybe the biggest thing is we're still really get a lot of great referrals from our current employees. They're very happy working at Knak and so want to recommend it to their other friends or colleagues that they've worked with, and that's also been great. So
Well, yeah, I mean, we mentioned early on your ENPS is 72, and that means that essentially, people are, very happy
yeah,
to refer.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I will say our ENPS was 100 for a long time, and then I said, this is not actually a good thing. Actually, this is something that I learned having 100 ENPS is that nobody wanted to say anything bad about it because they didn't want to be the ones to take the score down, which again, I would never have thought about that before this happened, because we were all like, oh, it's a perfect culture and everything, but it actually had some negative effects on people because they felt that pressure to be like, well, everyone else is loving it here. Why am I not? And sometimes they had legitimate things that could be improved. So we actually encourage people not to give us tens because we want to know what's actually happening.
Yeah. So be positive, but also be constructive.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay, cool. So you've hired people, you've filtered them, you've brought them in, they're in their roles, and we talked earlier about there's performance can often be sort of like somewhat quantitative, like, does this person meet their targets and so on. But there's also, as we talked about, this qualitative element. So how do you sort of assess that qualitative side on an ongoing basis? Like give us an idea of what that sort of performance
yeah,
management or people management sort of, is like
yeah,
on an
yeah.
ongoing basis at Knack.
So we do reviews twice a year. Like there's the one big one at the end of the year, and then there's like a, a semi-annual review. And so the way that they're structured is that we have, like, above all else, it's company performance, right? How is the company doing? How is the team doing? Then we get into their components. And so yeah, there's a performance element of that, which is pretty standard, but we also score people on those 4 pillars. So culture, customers, product, and growth. Even though some people have less opportunities to touch the different pillars, we still look at all of them and people are evaluated that way. So you could be the best performing person at your job, but if you're a detractor to the culture, that will be reflected in the review that we do.
Got it. And it's not just one person reviewing that person, you get input from multiple people?
Yeah. So we use Bamboo HR, and it has the whole, like, you have peer reviews, your manager reviews, you put in your own self-assessment. So all of that is kind of run through there.
Got it. So if you do find that someone is lagging on the culture side, then you're having that same sort of conversation you might on the performance side of, hey, got to bring this up to these levels, or
Yeah.
we're having another type of conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
Has that happened? Have you had that sort of an issue at Knack?
Like, I can't think of a time where that's happened. Actually, I should say there have been cases where some people are not living the culture as much as we would, that others are, or that we expect. And we definitely have talked to people about it. The reason I hesitated is we usually address that before the actual, like, review. So it's more just ongoing, continuous feedback that we give people.
Which I'm sure your team must appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, better not to have surprises after 6 months.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, great. So when you look back over the last few years at Knack, or even sort of like post, the adjustment in terms of values and so on at Revenue Pulse, are there any specific challenges that you think of? And I mean, COVID might be a great example, but maybe there's something else that you've had to overcome to get where you are, where the company culture and the sort of like glues that bind from the culture either helped you get through it, or conversely, and I'd be surprised if you end up going this direction, but it's possible, where you go, oh, our culture somehow held us back.
Yeah, like, I definitely think through COVID, having a strong culture helped us, get through it. It was almost like, because we're such a tight team, we were almost another person, to, like, a whole team to help people get through this challenging time that everyone went through, or another support system. So for sure, I think that helped us. It helped us adapt quicker to the new realities. It helped us stay together as a team, stay communicating, and stay aligned on, like, what we're doing here. But yeah, that I think really helped us.
And you've never seen your culture actually inhibit or somehow, hold up your growth in any way?
Uh, I mean, it holds up hiring, that's for sure. I mean, if we weren't so serious about it, we could hire people quicker.
But,
But I
but you,
think the end result of that is we're gonna pay, you might gain now to pay later.
yeah,
So that might be one area. I'm sure as well, like, some other companies might focus more on revenue and do things that would negatively impact their customers, or maybe neglect product to increase revenues. So I mean, if you look at it that way, maybe it would inhibit our growth a little bit there, but that's just that would be someone else's perspective, and it's definitely not mine or the company that we're trying to build here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, as we talked about early on, you've grown over 100% a year for the last 3 years. And, sometimes in a VC funded business, there's really that focus on growth. Like they would probably have growth as a top pillar and culture as,
Yeah,
make sure that culture is good, type of thing.
yeah,
And so it being in the position you are where you head up the company and you've bootstrapped it, it's given you, I think, the privilege and the luxury of being able to say, you know what, first things first, let's make culture the first priority and growth will follow.
yeah, for sure. And I think, and I wrote a whole blog post about this, but the grass is always greener, and we always think, hey, if we had a bunch of money, we could do all these other things. But I think what we always come back to is that if we did go that path, it would change our culture, and there would be different, KPIs that we would be measured on. And being bootstrapped, I mean, we have targets, but we're not like getting our funding pulled if we don't hit them, and we're not going to be limited on raising another round after we're really able to focus on our cultures and our product and our people and customers, and the growth has always come. So it's nice, to your point, to have the luxury of not being on a timeline like that.
Right. So going back to those pillars, like what, now that you've had, these many years of experience running both of these companies and having gone through what you've gone through and having put in place what you have. So what do you see as that connection between culture and growth? Is there like an inherent connection?
Yeah. I think having a good culture means that your people are happier, and feel connected and feel invested and want to, like, at the end of the day, want to come to work every day and care about what they're doing. And I think if you have happy people doing work that they care and are passionate about, growth will happen, because they're all connected. If people are happy, they're able to do good work, and if they do good work and they're creating value for customers, growth happens.
Which is why it's the bottom of your, of your pillars.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what top takeaways for startup and scaling CEOs and founders who want to build and maintain a great culture?
I think, and this was a big mindset shift for me. Although on paper, it may seem very hard to connect culture with growth, there is 100% a connection there. I would also say that building a culture is not just about writing your core values down on a piece of paper and framing it and putting it up in your office. You and the whole company are responsible for holding people accountable to the culture, and it's an ongoing thing. It's not like a set it and forget it thing. It governs everything that you do. So it requires time, effort, and commitment. But I think the value of what it creates in the end is worth every minute.
Yeah, as you said, time and effort, and it sounds like, especially when you talk about the stories and the breakout groups, and the and the the award, the accolade, continuous positive reinforcement of those values.
Yeah, exactly. Something that we bring up every week, and it takes that, right, to get people thinking about them and remembering them. And over time, if you can do it in an enjoyable and fun way that people like and they believe in, that Yeah, it can have huge positive impacts on your business.
Awesome. So closing out, last question. What are the next major milestones for Knak and what's top of mind for you?
Yeah, well, it's been almost 2 years since we've been able to see everyone together as a company. We've more than doubled our headcount as a company too. So getting together again and being able to hold one of those offsites where we all see each other in one room and in many cases meet each other for the first time is a huge milestone that I'm looking forward to. And just kind of bringing the team together and starting to be able to do both in person and virtual. I'm very much looking forward to that.
That's awesome. So it's interesting. Like I asked you about major milestones, and rather than talking about customers and growth, you really talked, you went right to, hey, here's what I'm most looking forward to, which is really bringing the team together.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Pierce, thank you. This has been enormously helpful, insightful. I feel like I've learned a lot, from what, you've shared here. Uh, we're putting together a little bit of a kind of summary of top, culture tips. And I know that, there's a lot that you've shared here that, we'll end up figuring in there. I love the breakouts and the shared stories, and, the Knakalate is obviously, a great idea. So, kudos to you on everything that you've built, both Revenue Pulse and now at Knak, and best wishes for continued success for you and the team going forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex. It's great to be able to teach you something because I learned a ton from you over the years. So it feels a little bit weird, but I'm glad that there are some good takeaways there.